This video is a continuation from the previous video. So if you ever hear the term local color, that is just talking about visibly realistic, accurate color. And of course, it is still, while it's seen as objective, there's still a big debate amongst people about whether the red you see is the exact same as the red I see. And based on the fact that there is some variation in genetics, it's possible that the red I see is a little bit slightly more orange than the red you see. There's also the optics of the human eye. Some of us wear glasses because of that. So there are things that can certainly impact the colors we see. However, those shades that we see are probably going to be slight. And they're close enough that my red is not your blue. We do know that. As we discussed, whoops, if I can get to that slide. There we go. Optical color is when your eye blends colors that are around each other into seeing a different color than the parts, right? Again, it goes back to Gestalt. We see the whole, and the whole is the eye blending the colors together into one. Arbitrary color. So this is when you use colors that are not normally associated with something. And Matisse did that in his painting. So we have colors that are kind of striking because it doesn't accurately reflect the visible reality. And again, it's another bold thing to do, but it can also be very interesting and original to do. So it is a tool that you have in your kit for something you can do that's different. Okay, color psychology and symbolism. So what we've covered so far is considered color theory from the sense of color harmonies, color schemes, how colors work together in a way that create harmonious combinations to look at. What we want to talk now are about the psychology of color, as in when we see a color, how does it impact our emotions? How does it impact our feelings? How does it impact our behavior? Because it does. And also the symbolism of color so that we understand what colors represent. So the connection between an artist's mood or emotion could explain why they chose the palette they did. It will explain why you choose your palette. Your palette, more often than not, is going to be based on your client's preferences. Sometimes, though, they don't really have preferences and you get to choose. Understand that mood is linked to color, and we're going to talk about that. Color symbolism is also specific to a culture. Our color symbolism is very different than, say, Japan. For us, the color of mourning is black, and mourning as in mourning death is black, whereas for them it's white. So colors mean different things in different cultures as a result of that. And color does convey messages. So when you look at these works of art, how do they make you feel? Consider how much of that is the influence of colors and how much is the composition. So here we could look at this and start to pick out what are the main colors. How do those colors impact the way we feel when we look at them? What about this work? What if Drowning Art by Ivan Puig had been colored blood red instead of milky white? What if it had been colored teal blue? Would that change how it makes you feel? An example, here you go. Is it different here because it's blue? Does the color matter? And if so, in what way? How do the two images compare? They're the same image colored differently. How do they contrast? How does the color change the mood of the same exact painting with two different layers? The Temptation of St. Anthony by Salvador Dali. On top is the original. The bottom has been recolored. How are they different? Which one do you prefer? Why do you prefer it? Now, again, as we've talked about the science behind this, but preference That is purely subjective. And that is because we all have had different experiences associated with color. Do you prefer the color blue? Do you prefer it in red? Or the painting, I'm sorry. Do you prefer the painting in blue, red, green, or gold? Which one do you prefer? I'm drawn to the one in red. What does that say about my personality? What if you're drawn to one of the other ones? Why? Well, believe it or not, colors do convey meaning. And the meaning can change depending on the context in which it is used. That means that red doesn't only mean one thing. Red means multiple things, and what it means depends on how it's used and the context in which it's used. And as we talk about, different cultures have different meanings. So let's explore this color psychology and symbolism in art and design. And we're going to start with the color gray. Now, yes, gray is a color. And when we talk about grayscale, we're talking about the scale on the left that goes from black to white and all the iterations of gray in between. Gray can represent elegance, humility, respect, reverence, boredom, dullness, neutrality, pollution, formality. So see, some of these words are positive, some of them are negative, and some of them are neutral. So it just depends on the context. Let's take a look at some examples. So how does this photograph make you feel? It's completely gray, shades of gray, a little bit of white and a little bit of black, but you always want the whitest of white and the blackest of black. Oops, my mouse keeps trying to get escape and I don't know why. There we go. The blackest of black and the whitest of white somewhere in your composition. It helps anchor it and provide contrast. So how does this make you feel looking at this in these different shades of gray? This is neutral gray. What about here where the color gray is warmer? It's what is known as French gray. How does it make you feel? How is it different? How is it different from the previous photo? And what about here? Guernica. At first, when you look at it, it seems really boring and mundane. But, once we start talking about the story behind why it's gray, does that change the significance of the work? The painting was based on events in 1937 when Hitler bombed a village called Guernica, which is located in northern Spain. And it was the first time there was an aerial bombing of a civilian population. And it was actually just this cold-blooded training mission designed to test new bombs. And it was also meant to terrorize people. And so for 3 hours, 25 bombers dropped 100,000 pounds of explosives on the village and incendiary bombs that set fire. And they completely reduced it to rubble. And so they shot the civilians that managed to escape and try to run away. It was absolutely devastating. The fires burned for 3 days. 70% of the city was destroyed. 1,600 civilians were wounded or killed. Yeah. So it's not boring and mundane anymore, is it? White. White is either the absence of color or it is all color, depending on whether we're doing additive or subtractive color. And it has many different meanings depending on its context. It can be purity, peace, innocence, simplicity. It could also be sterility, coldness, cowardice. It represents death in some Eastern cultures. A white flag is an international sign of surrender. Albino animals are sacred because they're rare. Meanwhile, a white elephant is useless. So, here's something that's neutral, positive, and negative. It just depends on the context. Another example of white on white. These white shades of white, just like gray, have a tint to them. So they're not neutral white. They're warm and cool white. So you got this cool white square on this warm white square, and creates a composition. beautiful. Now, obviously, it's not just white. There's some shades of gray in there to create 3 dimensions, but it's primarily a monochromatic white scheme, building in white. And then black. Power, sophistication, elegance, mystery, wealth. Can also mean evil, death in Western cultures, fear. In auto racing, a black flag has a meaning, right? So in pirates, the Jolly Roger has meaning. So all these colors can represent and they have different contexts, and I mean different meanings depending on their context. Black is seen as a color of seriousness and authority. You often see uniforms worn by authority figures as black. Black tuxedo, black cat, symbol of, unfortunately, bad luck, even though they're not. Building in black, right? So you don't often think of the clad exterior of a building being in black, but it could be. And you see it very formal. Imagine if this were copper or silver panels instead of black. What if it were green or blue? It's very different. And that is because color matters. Okay, we're going to stop this video here and continue in the next.